It was decided to start on a Saturday. The strategy we had was to scatter our seating. We would show up individually, one by one. We did not go as a group because we went as paying customers. And I happened to be the first one to show up. I sat in the center of the lunch counter, and the waitress came over to me and she said, she took my order, "What would you like to have?" And I said, well, I was surprised. I said, "I'll have a Coke." And she brought the Coke over to me, and I started drinking it. When Peggy came in and she sat down, and the waitress looked at Peggy, and then she looked at me, and she came over to me and she said, "You're not colored, are you, dear?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And right away, her attitude changed. She pulled away, and she looked the other way. She no longer had any contact with me or any of the others. We just sat there, and that was the beginning of the sit-in.
Dockum Drug Store itself was a chain of drugstores, nationally known, part of the Rexall Corporation. And there was a number of them throughout Kansas and on the East Coast. The theory being that if we could evoke change through the Rexall Corporation, there'd be a good chance that single standing drugstores and even other business establishments would not have any reason to continue, to resist or have segregated seating.
Well, Dockum's Drug Store was a major drugstore located in the center of Wichita. It was a main place for people to go during the lunch hour, for teenagers to go for a hamburger and a Coke. The policy of the store was that they did not serve colored, as we were called at that time. So if we wanted to get something to purchase to eat, we would have to take it out or stand at the end of the lunch counter, and then we were served in styrofoam containers.
It was degrading, dehumanizing. You felt like something was wrong, but you learned to cope with it and to ignore it. And there were exceptions. On occasion, you might have seen a black person, even at Dockum's. And there was another drugstore around here called Woolsworth, and one on the corner called Grant's. It always stuck out like a sore thumb when I would come in those establishments, and Crescent's across the street where I used to work. On occasion, as I say, you might have seen a black person, but it was almost like an unwritten code: just don't make a habit of it, and don't too many of you come at one time. That was the, so it wouldn't be totally accurate to say the blacks were not served. They were, but you couldn't count on it. It wasn't systematic.
This was 1958, the summer of 1958. Most of us had graduated from high school, were either attending a university or preparing to attend a university or working locally. My mother was very involved in the NAACP, and she had civil rights attorneys coming by. One of them was Franklin Williams from the Bay Area in San Francisco, and he came by and he spoke to a group of us at our home, and the idea of sitting in was mentioned. After talking to it with my cousin, Ron Walters, he was the president of the youth chapter and I was the vice president. We agreed that this is something we wanted to do, and we wanted to carry it off ourselves.
And when we heard this idea, we thought it was interesting, but there was a potential downside to that as well. This was the early part of the 1950s up to about the mid part. We were aware of Emmett Till, who was bludgeoned and mutilated in 1955. We were aware of the Little Rock Nine black youth who tried to integrate Central High School in Little Rock. We were aware of Rosa Parks' efforts to desegregate public busings in Montgomery, part of the Montgomery bus boycott movement. And so we had to be aware of the potential for some very negative, dangerous things that could have happened. At the same time, it certainly seemed like something that was socially just, socially righteous, and made sense.
So we decided to use the nonviolent approach that Dr. Martin Luther King used here in the United States. So we did this role playing at St. Peter Claver Church, the basement of the rectory. We went there and we would sit on stools and we would practice how we would react if we were pushed or insulted some sort of way or called out of our name. And we did this over and over until we felt comfortable in using the nonviolent approach.
This is the site of the Dockum building and where the Dockum Drug Store was located. Obviously, it's under reconstruction right now. I'll just point out, at least there is one structure that's still located here, and that's this row of elevators that always caught our attention. A lot of people would come in and would use those elevators to go upstairs. I point that out because these would have been some of the patrons who would have used the drugstore. There was a revolving door about right here. So most of us might have, when we were involved in the sit-in, actual sit-in, would have come in this entrance, but we would have also some come in that back entrance so that it wouldn't necessarily appear that we were all coming in for the same purpose at the same time. That became evident after we started to take seats along the counters that would have been on this back wall here. We came there for a purpose. That was to make a purchase and to challenge a 50-year-old custom. We had drawn up some placards, and unfortunately we don't have one of them left. But they probably would say, Dockum discriminates, we like to have service, something like that. And we would have them up and down the counter behind us so they'd be at eye level. I was feeling uncomfortable about it. We took them down. But I went back behind a petition where the local manager was. I reinforced that we didn't come to cause trouble. We like to make a purchase, receive service like anyone else that comes in. And he went on to say something to the effect that he was not the owner, he's just enforcing the policy of the store, but that he would be willing to arrange a meeting for our attorney, who was one of our mentors, talking about Attorney Chet Lewis. And shortly thereafter, I think Attorney Lewis called the store, made arrangements to have an interview with the owner of the Dockum Drug Store. And I'm not sure we ever came back to work after that.
We were the first to start this, and the Rexall stores all over our country integrated as a result of what we did here in Wichita. And we didn't know this at first, but eventually it came out that this is what their policy was. All over the nation, Rexall stores would not segregate to customers.
There was one article in a white newspaper, and at some point there was an article in the black newspaper. For the most part, it wasn't talked about. It was almost as though the proponents and the antagonists were working together to keep it as quiet as possible, but for different reasons. But in and of itself, it was a small piece of a mosaic puzzle that was necessary. It was important, I don't want to belittle it, but it took Greensboro, it took Oklahoma City, it took St. Louis, as well as Wichita, to finally get justice for all people.
We didn't intend to be the first in anything. We were simply trying to change things locally. This is our hometown. And as a result, I think the fabric of Wichita has changed for the better and is continuing to change for the better. It was just a great achievement for all of us. I am happy that I was a part of it.
Just because there may not have been the extremities of violence, the lack of human dignity is a lack of human dignity. If there's no progress at all, and that happens when good men and women choose to live with and tolerate the status quo, it's better to strive for change than to live with the present when we know that things could be better.